The Seven Secrets of Somewhere Lake by Sam Campbell. Chapter 18. Tornadoes by Mail. Our stay at Phantom Ranch was timeless as the canyon itself. Day after day, the lazy warmth and quiet lulled us into a languorous that was all too pleasing. We slept late in the cool mornings, sauntered the trails at unhurried pace, rested in the shade of cottonwood trees, swam in the ranch pool. In fact, Jenny and I had a vacation experience which was a novelty in our busy lives. It was lovely to be lazy, but our do-nothing period was broken up sharply. One day a ranger arrived, riding through from the north rim to the south rim. He inquired for the Campbells. "I have a message for you," he said. "An Indian named John Corn asked me to say this to you. I have found what you are looking for. Does that mean anything to you?" "Yes, I think I understand," I replied. "Thank you for bringing the message." "I'm curious. What did you lose? A watch? Billfold? Or what?" I laughed. "Nothing lost. John has located a picture I want, that is all." After the ranger left, Jenny asked what I made of the message. "I believe John has found our mountain lion," I declared. "We must leave in the morning." We left early on our return journey to the North Rim. Pete thought it was wise to get through the bright Angel Canyon stretch before the sun was high. Temperatures up to 130 degrees have been recorded in the canyon. The walls are high and close together, and when the sun concentrates on the place, it becomes literally an oven. By late morning, we were well beyond the area of extreme heat. To our delight, we learned that riding uphill on a mule is more comfortable experience than riding down. You fit better in the saddle, and there isn't that constant resistance to the downward pitch that makes the leg muscles feel so abused. Judy had an experience that was exciting while it lasted. We had reached the steep part of our climb, and Z-Bar was going slower than ever. Jeff and Rosie were several switchbacks ahead of him. In the brush at the trailside, there was a sound which both Jenny and Jeff heard. It may have been a snake. Jenny wasn't sure. Jeff wasn't sure either, and he was taking no chances. Rearing up on his hind legs like a spirited show horse, he whirled around and started down the trail. Fortunately, Jenny went right with him. She really is a natural rider. I saw the whole thing from about 100 foot below and managed to turn Z-Bar so that he blocked the trail. It wasn't necessary, though, as Jeff recovered his composure and came to a full stop. Pete had dismounted and come like a monkey down the side of the mountain, landing in front of Jeff and catching hold of his bridle. It was all over in a minute's time. Jeff was not the least bit excited. He hadn't intended to run away. He just didn't want to be near that funny noise. For once, Z-Bar walked at a decent pace, and we reached the scene of action. Pete and I searched for a snake, but could find none. It may have been only the tumbling of a rock or the flight of a small bird. Anyway, we were deeply grateful for the way it turned out. The return journey naturally took longer than the trip down into the canyon. Travel up the steep slopes was slow, and frequent rest periods for the mules were necessary. When at long last we arrived at the corral on the north rim, we were saddle-weary. There I did the meanest thing I have ever done to Jenny. I took her picture as she got off Jeff and walked away. I wouldn't know just how to describe that walk. It was something like the waddle of a duck with bunions. One foot would start in a direction it wasn't supposed to go, and by the wide circling movement landed in front of the other one. I hid the camera so my dismounting could not be registered, and thereby deprive the world of a classic in the ridiculous. We had dinner served in our cabin that evening, so we could look into our mound of mail as we ate. 6 letters from Hybub, exclaimed Jenny. Something exciting must have happened. Plenty had happened. We arranged the letters according to date of postmark so that we might read them in order. The first one began with an exclamation point. Dear Jenny and Sam, Zipper has disappeared. Zany discovered it first. He came barking at our cabin the morning before dawn. We couldn't make him be still. We followed him, and he took us all around the island, hunting everywhere. He kept whining all the time. We found Xenia and Zowie, but Zipper was gone. She has been making little practice swims lately, and I guess finally decided she could make it to the mainland. Don't hang up. Tony and I are headed out to find her. Later, Zipper is back. Guess who found her? It was Bill. Zipper was nearly 5 miles away, came right up to a farmhouse. Bill happened by and recognized her by the rope scar that is still on the back of her neck. Now we can eat our breakfast. Forgot all about it. Love, Hubbub. Oh, can't you just feel the excitement of those boys when that happened? Exclaimed Jenny. Yes, and why do you suppose Zipper swam away? I returned. She isn't old enough to do that. Or is she? Apparently she is, said Jenny logically. Well, let's see what the second letter has to offer. It was so full of excitement it nearly jumped out of the envelope. Dear Jenny and Sam, Zipper has gone again. Zanny got us up in the middle of the night to tell us. The sun hasn't come up even now. We're waiting for it to get light, and then we go after her. It ought to be easier to find her this time, for we put a red ribbon on her neck. Tony is getting some breakfast ready. We will leave in a few minutes. Later. Xenia is missing too. Zanny wouldn't settle down. He kept whining and pleading with us. He led us to the shed where Xenia sleeps, and she wasn't there. We searched the island, but no skunk. What do we do now? Still later. We want a meal of venison, raw. We are so mad at Zipper, we could pick her spots off one at a time. We scoured the county for her yesterday. No Zipper anywhere. We called until we were hoarse. Zany hunted like the swell dog he is, sniffing every inch of the whole forest. No Zipper. We just returned, footsore, weary, discouraged, downhearted, disappointed, and some other things. There, on the island, right at the back door, acting as if nothing had happened, stood Zipper. Little does she know how close she is to being fried alive. Going after Xenia tomorrow. Love, Hubbub, and Tony. Quick, open the next letter, I begged Jenny. What is the news about Xenia? It is postmarked 2 days after the other letter, she observed. They must have been busy. The third letter popped like a firecracker. Dear Jenny and Sam, help, help, and quick. Hold this letter at arm's length and downwind from you. I hope nothing gets in, but the story I have to tell you. Yesterday we searched from morning to night for our skunk. We worked over the mainland until Tony and I knew every tree and brush by its first name. No Xenia. Last night Tony thought he would make one more try before going to bed exhausted. He went over to the mainland and started looking around with the flashlight. He saw Xenia and walked up to her. Only, it wasn't Xenia. Whoever it was, let him have it, and there was plenty of it. He came back smelling worse than some kind of politics. Where is he now? I have him buried back of the boathouse. Even Zany, Zowie, and Zipper won't have anything to do with him. Over long distance, he dictated this masterpiece. There once was a funny bohunk who searched for a cute little skunk. He found the polecat, and so that was that. Now his social standing is sunk. More later, Hubbub and Tony, by proxy. Poor Tony, Jenny, and I burst out in unison. He would be the one to pick up a strange skunk. After all, skunks look alike, and there ought to be a law against it. The fourth letter came by special delivery, said Jenny, opening it as she spoke. What do you suppose has happened now? The boys wrote, Dear Jenny and Sam, where should I begin? Well, let's talk about Tony first. When I sent the previous letter, he was buried, at least he should have been. I dug him up and started to reclaim him, though it seemed a waste of time. While I burned his clothes, he washed in kerosene, lemon juice, tomato juice, and some soap that smelled worse than skunk perfume. Right at the end of all this gruesome task, we discovered Xenia on the island again. Only it wasn't just Xenia. She was twins. She brought home a playmate, and Tony insists it is the same skunk that was so impolite to him. The two of them are feeding at Xenia's pan right now, and Zany is feeding with them. Later, much later. Zany's almost mad. He is sitting on the front step howling. Tony and I have decided to let him howl while he gets some dinner. We haven't had a bite since breakfast, and it is 9 o'clock at night. Sandy came to us a little before noon, so excited he nearly ran out of his own hide. We knew someone was missing, so we went with him. We found Xenia and her pal, but Zipper and Zowie were both gone. Has anyone got a nice 12-foot fence that we can put around the island? This feels like trying to hold an armful of eels. Tony and I have about decided that the thing to do is to let them go and come as they please, as if we had any choice in the matter. Zany won't let us. He howls and barks whenever we quit looking and keeps it up until we join him. Now he can just howl his head off. We have to have something to eat. Still later, we thought it was awful quiet. Now we find Zany has left the island. He's out looking for his pals. Here we go again. Hope we have good news for you in the next writing. Love, Hybub and Tony, in person. Letter number 5 was written 48 hours after the previous one. Zipper had been seen. Zany came back, but nothing was known of the whereabouts of Zowie. Letter number 6 was a flurry of excitement with an element of foreboding. It read, Dear Jenny and Sam, this letter would be a book if I told of all that has happened in the last few hours. To begin with, Zipper came back in the middle of last night, bringing 2 wild deer with her. We heard a splashing and Zany barked a little, so we took our flashlights and went out. Zipper was just coming out of the water into the island, the other 2 following her. She walked up the bank towards us, and we spoke to her. The other 2 were standing in the shallow water. Zany suddenly was carried away with enthusiasm. He raced up to Zipper and stood on his hind legs, licking her in the face. Then he began one of those wild runs of his, the way he does when he is extra happy. That was more than the wild deer could stand. They jumped into the lake and swam away. Zipper stayed on. This morning Zowie came back. We are hoping he won't run into this new skunk. I have never seen an animal so nearly starved. He looked and acted as if he hadn't had a square meal since he left. We fed him all he would eat, and now he is asleep under the shed. Zany was happy to see him, but the fox wouldn't play. He seemed to be all in all, probably been running ever since he left the island. Now comes the big news. We went to Somewhere Lake for the first time since the tornado struck here. The 7 secrets were all over the place. Are they getting cute? We saw some brush sticking out of the lake at one place and believe they're beginning to make a food catch there. No evidence of a house as yet. Tony and I walked around the lake to see about the cutting was going. There are 12 trees down and 20 more show cuttings. One beaver cut a limb off while we watched him. Looks good for your pictures. Just before we left came a surprise that is a little frightening. On the shore opposite the point where our trail begins, we found tracks that made very recently by a man. Who is it that has cut in on our secret? Love, Hybub and Company. Jenny looked worried, and so did I. From the description, the visitor had come from the forest area beyond the lake, and not over our trail. That meant that it was someone familiar with the woods. Our contemplations were interrupted by a knock at the door. John and Kona, cried Jenny as she opened it. How glad we are to see you. Come in. It was a happy reunion. Kona ran and threw himself in Jenny's arms. John extended his strong handshake to me. We were so disappointed when we found your camp gone, John, I said. You hadn't told us you were going away. It was a sudden decision, replied the Indian, smiling. I guess I was just self-conscious. I thought I would never tell my story to anyone, and after I talked to you, I wanted to get away. So Kona and I went into a region I have always liked, to the west. We wished for you at the bottom of the canyon, Jenny managed to say in spite of a bear hug by Kona. Tell me, John looked at me earnestly, did you enjoy the trip down? Not so much the trip down, my friend, I replied, rubbing myself where aches had been, but being down there was wonderful. You go down? Kona risked his father's displeasure with one little tease. Yes, we went down, I said between clenched teeth, shaking him in spite of Jenny's protection. We went down, we saw, and we were conquered. It is a wonderful place. Our friends were seated, and we gave them a detailed account of our canyon experience. They were especially interested in the story of the animals at Phantom Ranch. John had known Mulligan, the buck, the year the fawn had been brought in. Kona squealed with delight when his father repeated to him the story of Howard the mule and the cute ringtails. Another year, and I shall take Bohunk down there, said John. He rides pretty well now, but he is so small the mule wouldn't know he was on his saddle. He'll be ready next year. Your message brought us out of the canyon, I said. Did I interpret it right that you have found a mountain lion? Toho! Exclaimed Kona excitedly. Toho! Toho! Yes, said John, quieting his child. We have seen Toho, the mountain lion. There is a female with 2 or 3 young, not far from our camp, sunning herself on the rocks each morning. Splendid, I exclaimed. What do we do now? Where and how do we go? You have some camping equipment? Asked John. Yes. Could you go in the morning? Yes. Very well, said the Indian. We will take you to our camp. Better be prepared to spend a few days there. We have plenty of provisions. The only drawback is you must ride in our old car. It is a bit rough, but it will get you there. I have named it Mulo, the mule. We go over a fire lane that is not traveled more than once a year. Kona didn't quite understand all that had happened. He spoke in Hopi and in rather a loud voice for him. Entwined in the other words I could make out Taho, and I knew the nature of his inquiry. His father said simply, Campbell. Does Campbell mean tomorrow? I asked, reasoning out the conversation. John nodded. Campbell Taho, I said to Kona. Campbell Taho. His eyes widened to hear me say words in his native tongue. Then he danced around, repeating over and over again, Campbell Taho, tomorrow the mountain lion.